I'm going to start off with a quiz. Now, I know you can't raise your hand and answer or answer verbally, but let's go through just a few of these quiz questions and test your understanding with these. So my first quiz question is, if we achieve a CMMI maturity level, an ISO, AS, or TL registration, or an ITIL certification, we have improved our performance. And the answers are true or false. Well, that is mostly false because you might do those things for their own sake and not really tie them to business performance improvement. How about the second one? If we implement Lean or Six Sigma, we'll improve our performance. Could be true under the right conditions, but again, generally, based on my observation and experience, it's false. We can improve our processes by writing better or more detailed procedures. I know a lot of people who believe that. That's also generally false. And you get the pattern here. If we improve our processes, we will automatically see performance results. If we're an agile company or a lean organization, we'll improve performance. Or if we use models and standards as the best place to start for improvement efforts. The reason, and some of you in the audience will find this to be rather shocking, because what I'm basically doing here to some of you is I'm kind of smashing your whole belief system about process improvement. And I'm doing that intentionally, and I hope there is some shock value out there. Because the reason that these statements are not automatically true, even though you often assume them to be true, is because what you really need to do to make them true is you need to tie these actions and tie these types of initiatives that you are calling process improvement to business performance improvement, and then measuring what those business performance results were. So why do we need return on process? Well, let's just take a quick survey of some events that many of us have lived through, either personally or lived through vicariously by watching the news on television over the past several years. Many of the giant financial institutions that would have collapsed in 08 and 09 without a taxpayer bailout had achieved CMMI maturity levels or Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. But you're left wondering, well, where was the performance? A giant automaker also bailed out, had achieved CMMI maturity levels for many years. Where was the performance? Where were the controls? A major airframe integrator and defense contractor with years of AS9100 registrations and CMMI maturity levels had its multi-billion-dollar contract canceled by the Navy for lack of performance. So if you posit the theory that well, if this organization is CMMI maturity level 5, or this organization twice a year achieves its ISO or AS9100 registrations, and there's automatically performance, here's 3 examples from a very, very large body of examples where that assumption is provably not true. So when business leaders invest in tools and technology, your CTO or your CIO, they closely track and watch for the return on that investment. When they invest sometimes many millions in process improvement, how come no one tracks the resulting performance results? Why isn't somebody watching the ROP, the return on process? And that is what this presentation is about today. And again, I want to remind everyone, the book, which will come out this fall, it will be 350, 400 pages. There's no way I can cover all of the detail that you want in 40 or 50 minutes in a presentation. So I'll remind you again at the end that if you want the lower atomic level detail under any of these ideas, you'll need to buy that book in the fall. So what is wrong with models and standards? Well, inherently nothing is wrong with models and standards. It's how people perceive or misperceive or use or misuse them that is the problem. And here's what goes wrong with models and standards. People view them as requirements or prescriptive instead of being viewed as guidelines. People view them as best practices without any implementation context. And my favorite author on the topic of best practices is Stephen Shapiro, who published a book last year titled Best Practices Are Stupid. And to call, a practice out of the CMMI or a standard out of ISO 9000 a best practice is analogous to saying, well, a giraffe has the best neck in the world, okay? Well, the giraffe doesn't have the best neck in the world. The giraffe has the best neck to suit the purposes and the needs of a giraffe, but that doesn't necessarily make it the best neck for all other living creatures on the planet. Models and standards are often perceived literally instead of conceptually or notionally, and I see this in a lot of places. People will write their processes and procedures, and they'll name them after using the language of the CMMI or ISO 9000. People use models and standards as a test instead of a measure. So the test is, well, did we achieve a maturity level, instead of, did we measure the performance improvement and the value of that performance improvement from the improvements we made to processes. And it's also, what goes wrong is how models and standards are sold. Let me give you an example. When you go out and you read the literature and the case studies and you hear the stories at conferences about organizations that use the CMMI, and it could be not the CMMI, it could be some other standard or some other model. What you're going to find is you're going to find the set of case studies or stories that are in this one quadrant of my grid here. So what gets advertised is organizations that use the CMMI or ISO 9000 or AS 9100 that are successful, and you'll know all about them. But what you won't hear, because no one does systemic research on this, and certainly no one publishes it, are the organizations that are in the other sets. So, for example, what about organizations that use the CMMI that are unsuccessful? What do you hear about them? You don't hear about them. Those stories aren't published. And how many organizations are in that category? What about organizations that don't use the CMMI and are successful? Again, you don't know about that subset or how large that subset is. And then organizations that don't use the CMMI and are unsuccessful also. So when you are trying to make the business case for adopting a model or a standard in your organization, you're going to try to just use the information in here, because that's going to make your point. That's going to make your case for you in the green box. But you need to be aware that there are lots of other organizations in these other categories, and that you're not really seeing the whole picture unless you go look for it. A little bit more about what's wrong with models and standards is that organizations will sometimes try to justify their unmeasured return on the investment in process improvement by citing correlations as if they were causations. And I think all of you, whether you're a statistician or not, you know that correlation does not prove causation. So I have a few example statements here that I've seen in conference presentations, such as, while moving to maturity level 5, we reduced the testing phase by an average of 23 days. When we got to ML3, we had a 15% increase in customer satisfaction. With our ISO registration, we reduced defects by 20%. When you put these words together in a sentence, to the unsuspecting audience, it sounds like a causal relationship, but it's really only a correlating relationship unless you mathematically prove the causation, and unless you remember that there may have been other effects of new technology or improved technology, effects of skill changes in the people who are performing the process. All of those could have also contributed